You live in the most connected age in human history, yet something inside you feels quietly starved. Messages arrive instantly, faces scroll endlessly, voices are always available. And still, beneath the noise, there is an ache that refuses to be explained away. A sense that something essential is missing. Not excitement, not success, not belonging in the social sense. Something deeper, something older. A loneliness that doesn't make sense given how surrounded you are. This is not depression. This is not weakness. This is not a personal failure. This is the echo of a forgotten truth pressing against the walls of your awareness. Think about it honestly. You can be sitting next to people you love, people who know your name, your history, your story, and still feel utterly alone. You can be praised, admired, validated, and yet feel unseen. You can achieve what you were told would complete you and still feel unfinished. This contradiction should alarm you, because if separation were natural, if isolation were truly what you are, then this pain wouldn't exist. You would accept it as normal, but you don't. Something in you knows this isn't how reality is supposed to feel. Modern culture tells you this ache is a problem to be fixed. Scroll more, buy more, improve yourself, brand yourself, medicate yourself, distract yourself. But the ache never goes away, because it isn't asking to be filled, it's asking to be remembered. It is not a void, it is a signal, a pressure from something vast, pressing inward, reminding you that you are living under an assumption that isn't true, the assumption that you are separate, alone, contained, cut off inside a private mind looking out at a hostile world. Let me tell you a quiet truth that ancient initiates understood and modern society has buried. The pain of separation is not caused by isolation. It is caused by believing in it. You feel fractured because you are trying to live as something you are not. Like a wave trying to survive as if it were not the ocean. Like a hand believing it must function without the body. The distress you feel is not psychological malfunction. It is spiritual dissonance. The sound of truth grinding against a lie you were taught to accept. There are moments, rare, fleeting, when the lie loosens its grip. A sudden stillness, a shared glance with a stranger, a moment in nature when the boundary between you and the world softens, a silence so deep it feels alive. In those moments, the loneliness vanishes without effort. You don't do anything to fix it. It simply dissolves. Ask yourself why. Why does the sense of isolation disappear the moment the sense of me relaxes? Why does peace arrive when identity steps aside? The ancient Gnostics spoke of this as remembrance, not learning something new, but remembering something obvious that had been obscured. They taught that the soul's greatest suffering was not sin, punishment, or exile, but forgetting its origin. Forgetting that it emerged from fullness, not fragmentation. Forgetting that it was never meant to exist as a sealed-off unit struggling for validation in a hostile universe. Forgetting that what you call self is not who you are, but a mask worn by something immeasurably larger. And here is the part that may unsettle you. The world you live in depends on you not remembering this. Entire systems, economic, social, psychological, even spiritual, are built on reinforcing the idea that you are alone, incomplete, and in need of external authority or acquisition to be whole. A unified being is difficult to control. A fragmented one is endlessly manageable. If you feel uneasy hearing that, good. That discomfort is awareness waking up. So let me ask you plainly, before we go any further, What if the loneliness you've been trying to heal is not a wound, but a wake-up call? What if the part of you that aches is not broken, but awake enough to sense the lie? And what if the self you defend every day, the anxious, striving, isolated me, is not your true identity at all, but the very thing standing between you and the truth you've been longing for? The idea that you were a separate self did not arise naturally. It was not discovered. It was constructed, conditioned, repeated until it felt inevitable. From the moment you learned language, you were taught to divide experience into me and not me, inside and outside, mine and yours. This was useful for survival, but catastrophic when mistaken for truth. Over time, a functional distinction hardened into an identity, and eventually, that identity became a prison you forgot how to question. The ancient Gnostics understood something radical. The greatest deception is not being told what to believe, but being taught what you are. Once identity is defined incorrectly, every perception that follows becomes distorted. You don't just see the world differently, you experience existence through a fractured lens. They used the language of archons and rulers not to describe monsters in the sky, but forces that govern perception, structures that fragment awareness and convince consciousness that it is small, isolated, and dependent. Look closely at the world you inhabit. Everything reinforces separation, competing identities, endless comparison, artificial scarcity, the constant pressure to define yourself, defend yourself, promote yourself. Even spirituality is often sold as self-improvement, fixing a broken individual rather than dissolving the illusion that created the brokenness. You are told to become better, not to see that the one trying to improve was never real in the first place. There is a reason modern anxiety revolves around control, image, and worth. When you believe you are separate, you must constantly secure your existence. You must be seen. You must be validated. You must protect your narrative. The ego becomes a survival program, scanning endlessly for threats and opportunities. And because it is built on a false premise, it can never rest. This is not a personal flaw. This is the inevitable result of mistaking a coping mechanism for an identity. The Gnostic texts warned that once consciousness identifies with the false self, it becomes trapped in repetition, seeking fulfillment where it cannot be found, fighting enemies that do not exist, worshipping authorities that promise completion while reinforcing dependency. This is why so many people feel exhausted without knowing why. They are living as custodians of a lie that requires constant maintenance. Let me be very clear and very honest with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not failing at life. You are not spiritually immature. You are responding normally to an abnormal assumption. The assumption that you are a separate unit, navigating a universe that is not you. The anxiety you feel is not evidence of brokenness. It is evidence of intelligence straining against a false framework. Here is the uncomfortable question most people avoid. Who would you be without your story? Without your labels, your past, your roles, your defenses? Not as an idea, but as a felt presence. Notice how quickly the mind resists this question. That resistance is not you. It is the program protecting itself. The illusion does not want to be seen, because once seen, it cannot survive. The ancient initiates did not overthrow the illusion by fighting it. They dissolved it by seeing through it. Gnosis was not rebellion, it was clarity. The moment consciousness recognizes itself as unified, the machinery of separation loses power. No war, no escape, just remembrance. And once that remembrance begins, the world you thought you lived in starts to reveal itself for what it truly is, a stage built for a character you never were. So before we go further, sit with this, not intellectually, but inwardly. What if the sense of me you've been protecting your entire life is not your identity, but your blindfold? And what if removing it is not loss, but liberation? The ego was never meant to be your identity. It was meant to be a tool, a temporary interface, a survival mechanism that helped consciousness navigate density, danger, and differentiation. But somewhere along the way, the tool was mistaken for the self. The mask fused to the face. And now most people spend their entire lives defending a construct that was only meant to be worn briefly. This is the root of the split mind, the division between what you are and what you think you are. The ego arises the moment consciousness believes it is alone, the moment awareness contracts and begins to say, "This is me, and everything else is not." From that instant, fear is born, not because the world is dangerous, but because separation demands protection. The ego is vigilance incarnate. It watches, it compares, it judges, it remembers wounds and anticipates threats, and because it is built on the assumption of isolation, it can never relax. Even pleasure becomes stressful because it must be maintained. You can see this clearly if you're willing to be honest with yourself. Notice how the mind narrates everything, how it constantly tells a story about who you are, what others think of you, what you must become, what you must avoid. That voice is not wisdom, it is not intuition, it is not truth. It is a pattern recognition system trying to keep an imaginary boundary intact. The ego doesn't want peace, it wants continuity. It wants to survive as you. This is why the ego reacts so strongly to silence. Stillness threatens it, presence dissolves it. The moment awareness stops feeding the story, the ego panics. It interprets quiet as annihilation. This is why so many people fear meditation, fear solitude, fear moments where nothing is happening. Without stimulation, the false self has nothing to anchor itself to. And in that gap, something far more vast begins to surface. Ancient Gnostic teachings describe this condition with ruthless clarity. They said the false self was a shadow cast by ignorance, not ignorance as stupidity, but ignorance as forgetting the source, forgetting unity, forgetting that awareness does not belong to the body or the name or the story. The ego, in their view, was not evil, but it was mistaken, a steward that declared itself king. Here is the brutal honesty most people never hear. The ego cannot be healed, perfected, or enlightened. It can only be seen through. Any spirituality that promises to upgrade the ego is reinforcing the illusion. Any system that tells you the self must become better is keeping the false center intact. Gnosis is not about improving the character, it is about realizing you were never the character at all. There is often grief when this begins to be seen, a strange mourning for a self that suddenly feels hollow. This is normal. You are not losing something real. You are releasing an investment, the investment of attention, emotion, and belief in a construct that demanded constant maintenance. When the ego loosens, there can be disorientation, a feeling of, who am I without my defenses? That question is sacred. Do not rush to answer it, because what comes next is not another identity. It is not a new label or role. It is something far simpler, and far more terrifying to the ego. Presence without ownership, awareness without a center, experience without a narrator. And once this begins to dawn, the split mind starts to heal. Not by stitching the ego back together, but by revealing that the split was never real in the first place. Before identity, before language, before thought divides experience into pieces, there is awareness. Not your awareness, awareness itself, open, boundless, unbroken. This is not philosophy, it is not theory. It is the most immediate fact of your existence. You cannot step outside it to examine it, because it is what is doing the seeing. The ancients knew this. They did not call it consciousness as an object, but consciousness as the ground of all objects. What modern science now gestures toward with terms like field and non-locality, the mystics experienced directly. Not as an idea, but as a lived reality. They understood that everything arises within a single continuum of being, not separate things interacting, but expressions unfolding within one indivisible whole. The illusion of separation comes later, introduced by thought, reinforced by habit, and defended by identity. Imagine the ocean again, but this time, do not imagine waves on the surface. Imagine water becoming aware of itself as water. No edge, no boundary, no inside or outside. This is closer to what the unified field points to. Consciousness is not contained in you. You are contained within consciousness. The body, the mind, the world, all appearances arising in the same boundless field of knowing. This is why moments of awe feel so destabilizing. Standing beneath a vast sky, hearing music that dissolves the sense of me, being fully present with another being without agenda. In those moments, the boundary softens, the illusion flickers. You don't feel connected to something. You feel as though the idea of separation briefly evaporates, and with it, fear disappears. Not because life is safe, but because there is no longer a someone standing apart from it. The Gnostics called this fullness the Pleroma, but the word matters less than the recognition. It was not described as a location, but as the condition of reality when nothing is excluded, nothing cut off, nothing standing alone. From this fullness, all forms arise, not as fragments, but as expressions. And the great forgetting occurs when an expression mistakes itself for an origin. Here is the key insight that shatters the false self. There is no individual consciousness having experience. There is experience happening within consciousness. This is subtle, and it is everything. The moment this is glimpsed, even briefly, the entire structure of identity begins to unravel. The question, "Who am I?" collapses, not because it is answered, but because it no longer makes sense. This recognition does not remove you from the world. It brings you fully into it, without resistance, without division, without the constant background tension of self-protection. Action still happens, thought still arises, personality still functions. But the center is gone. No owner, no narrator, no one standing apart, watching life from behind the eyes. And here is the part the ego hates most. This has always been the case. Nothing needs to be achieved. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be attained. The unified field is not a future state. It is what is happening right now, obscured only by identification with thought. You are not moving toward unity. You are waking up from the belief that you ever left it. So sit with this quietly, without trying to understand it conceptually. feel into the awareness that is listening to these words. Notice that it has no age, no name, no boundary. Ask yourself, not with the mind, but with attention itself, if awareness is already whole, what exactly has been missing all along? The greatest misunderstanding about the Pleroma is that it is somewhere else, a higher realm, a distant heaven, a luminous destination the soul must someday reach. This misunderstanding alone has kept millions searching outward for what has never been absent. The Pleroma is not a location in the cosmos. It is the condition of reality when nothing is divided, excluded, or named as separate. It is fullness before fragmentation, and you are not outside of it now. The ancients did not speak of the Pleroma as an escape from the world, but as the truth beneath it, a fullness so complete that nothing could be added to it, and therefore nothing could truly fall from it. The so-called fall was not a descent through space, but a contraction of perception, a narrowing of awareness until unity was forgotten and identity appeared. The moment consciousness said, "I am this and not that," the illusion of exile was born. This is why the language of exile feels emotionally true, even when it is metaphysically false. You feel like something has been lost because the sense of wholeness has been veiled. But listen carefully. You cannot leave what has no outside. You cannot fall out of infinity. You cannot be expelled from what contains all things. The pain you feel is not separation. It is resistance to believing you are separate. The Pleroma is not reached through effort. Effort implies distance. It is revealed through subtraction, through the gradual stripping away of false assumptions about who you are. Every belief that says, "I am only this body," every thought that insists, "I am trapped in my mind," every story that frames existence as hostile and fragmented, these are veils, not facts. The Pleroma does not arrive when you transcend the world. It appears when you stop misinterpreting it. This is why awakening often feels strangely ordinary. There are no fireworks, no permanent bliss, no cosmic soundtrack, just a sudden, unmistakable sense that something fundamental has been misunderstood for a very long time. The seeker realizes there is nothing to return to, because nothing was ever left. The fullness was present during confusion, present during suffering, present even during ignorance. It was simply unnoticed. Here is the truth that dismantles both religious guilt and spiritual ambition. You were never broken. There is nothing to fix, nothing to redeem, nothing to purify. The idea that you must earn your way back to wholeness is one of the most subtle and damaging illusions ever introduced. It keeps you striving toward a future instead of recognizing what is already here. It turns awakening into a transaction instead of a remembrance. The Pleroma does not demand worship. It does not require obedience. It does not reward belief. It does not punish ignorance. It simply is. And when the illusion of separation relaxes, what remains is not a divine being judging you, but being itself, quietly, intimately, unmistakably present. Not above you, not beyond you, as you, before you named yourself. So ask yourself this, slowly and without rushing to answer. If wholeness is already the case, what part of you has been insisting otherwise? And what would happen if, just for a moment, you stopped arguing with reality and allowed yourself to feel what has never stopped holding you? Gnosis is not belief. It is not faith. It is not adopting a new worldview to replace an old one. Gnosis is recognition, direct, immediate, and irreversible once seen clearly. It does not arrive through agreement, it arrives through clarity, and this is why institutions fear it. Belief can be managed. Gnosis cannot. Belief always involves distance. Something believed is always about something else. Gnosis collapses that distance. It is knowing by being, knowing without reference, knowing without explanation. You do not believe you are conscious, you know it. You do not believe awareness is present, you are it. Gnosis functions the same way. It is not added to you. It reveals what was always obvious once the noise quiets. The ancient Gnostics warned explicitly against confusing knowledge about truth with truth itself. Scriptures, symbols, myths, these were not meant to be clung to. They were meant to be used and then released. Maps, not destinations. But over time, the maps became idols. People began defending interpretations instead of having the experience, and the living fire of Gnosis was replaced with dead certainty. Here is the ruthless honesty few teachers offer. You cannot think your way into truth. Thought is part of the illusion. Useful, beautiful, necessary, but not sovereign. Gnosis arises when thought is seen as an object, not an authority. When awareness stops outsourcing its knowing to concepts. When the mind bows, not in submission, but in humility. Many seekers unconsciously resist Gnosis because it dismantles spiritual identity as thoroughly as it dismantles egoic identity. The one who is becoming enlightened must also dissolve. The one who collects teachings, experiences, and labels must also fall away. Gnosis leaves no one to claim it. And that is precisely why it is real. When Gnosis dawns, it often arrives quietly, a moment where the sense of me relaxes, a recognition that awareness has no edge, a realization that the observer has never been separate from the observed. There is no dramatic announcement, no cosmic validation, just a deep, undeniable simplicity that cannot be unseen. And once seen, the search loses its urgency. This does not make you special. It makes you ordinary in the most profound way possible. You stop standing apart from life. You stop trying to extract meaning from experience. Meaning reveals itself as inseparable from being. Compassion stops being a virtue and becomes a natural response, because harming another no longer makes sense when the illusion of separation has weakened. And this is the final barrier. Gnosis does not give you something. It takes something away. It removes the false center that believed it needed to become more. It removes the anxious self that believed it must earn existence. It removes the seeker who believed truth was somewhere else. What remains is not an achievement, but an intimacy with reality that was never missing. So before we continue, pause here. Feel into the awareness that is hearing these words. Notice that it is already clear, already present, already complete. Ask yourself, not intellectually, but sincerely, if truth is already what is aware right now, who exactly has been searching all this time? If the separate self is an illusion, then the question is no longer what should you believe, but what should you stop doing? Awakening does not come from adding practices to the ego's routine. It comes from interrupting the habits that keep the illusion intact. Most so-called spiritual practices fail because they are used to strengthen identity rather than dissolve it. They become ways for the ego to feel advanced instead of exposed. The first and most disruptive practice is deceptively simple. Notice awareness itself. Not what you are aware of, but what is aware. Thoughts arise, notice that they are seen. Emotions surge, notice that they are felt. Sensations move, notice that they appear and disappear. In every case, something remains unchanged, silent, present, untouched. Do not name it. Do not imagine it. Simply recognize that it is already functioning without effort. The false self survives by narrating experience. This is happening to me. I don't like this. I need this to change. Begin to notice the narration without following it. Let thoughts arise like weather without assigning ownership. You are not suppressing thought. You are removing its authority. This feels unnatural at first because you have mistaken commentary for consciousness. But stay with it. The moment narration loosens, space opens. Another destabilizing practice is shared presence. Look at another human being, not as a story, not as a role, not as a threat or ally, but as a field of experience mirroring your own. Notice how the sense of separation weakens when you stop interpreting and simply perceive. This is why love can feel transcendent, not because of emotion, but because the illusion of separation temporarily collapses. Silence is not a luxury here, it is a necessity. Silence is where the ego cannot perform. Set aside time with no stimulation, no music, no guidance, no identity reinforcement. The ego will resist violently. It will tell you this is pointless, dangerous, boring, or unproductive. That resistance is diagnostic. It reveals exactly where the false self depends on noise to survive. Do not seek bliss. Bliss is a distraction. Seek clarity. The moment you begin chasing pleasant states, the ego has reinserted itself as the experiencer. Gnosis does not feel euphoric, it feels obvious. Like realizing you were gripping your fist unnecessarily and finally letting go. Relief, not excitement. Groundedness, not escape. Expect disorientation. As the false self loosens, you may feel strangely empty, undefined, or directionless. This is not regression. This is withdrawal from a false center. Do not rush to fill the space. Let it breathe. Identity always rushes in to claim experience. Awareness does not need to. And here is the warning most teachers avoid giving. This will feel like dying. Not physically, but psychologically. Something you have defended your entire life will begin to lose relevance. The ego will interpret this as danger. It will try to reclaim control through fear, doubt, or sudden spiritual ambition. Let it pass. What is dissolving was never you. If unity is truth, why does it feel threatening? Why does the idea of losing the separate self evoke fear rather than relief? Because the ego was built to survive fragmentation. Unity represents the end of its jurisdiction, and it will not surrender quietly. From the ego's perspective, unity is annihilation. No boundaries, no ownership, no narrative continuity, no me to defend or improve. This is why people often interpret awakening as madness, dissociation, or danger. The ego cannot distinguish between losing control and losing existence. To it, they are the same. This fear often emerges as existential panic, a sense of groundlessness. Thoughts like, if I'm not this self, what am I? Or, will I disappear? These questions are not signs of failure. They are signs that the illusion is weakening. The ego is discovering it was never the author of experience, only a commentator pretending to be essential. Many people touch unity briefly, through meditation, psychedelics, or or crisis, and then retreat. They run back to identity, roles, beliefs, and routines. Not because unity was false, but because it was too honest. It exposed how much of their life had been organized around defending a fictional center. Society reinforces this retreat. We pathologize ego death. We label dissolution as instability. We praise groundedness, when what we really mean is conformity to identity structures. A person who no longer believes in separation is difficult to predict, difficult to manipulate, difficult to frighten. So the culture quietly pressures them to return to normal. Here is the paradox. What feels like loss is actually release. The fear does not come from unity, it comes from resistance to it. Like clenching against a current that is already carrying you. The more you fight, the more painful it feels. The moment you allow, the fear dissolves into stillness. This does not mean you become passive or detached from life. It means action no longer originates from deficiency. You no longer act to prove worth, secure identity, or avoid non-existence. You act because action happens, cleanly, responsively, without psychological noise. Grief may arise here. Grief for the years spent trying to become something. Grief for the effort poured into maintaining an identity that never delivered peace. Let the grief move. It is part of integration. You are not grieving your loss. You are grieving your loyalty to an illusion. So ask yourself this with total honesty. What are you afraid would happen if you were no longer separate? Not theoretically, but emotionally. What would you lose? Control, importance, story, suffering? And are you willing to question whether what you fear losing has ever actually protected you? When the illusion of separation begins to dissolve, the world does not magically become peaceful, but your relationship to it changes completely. You still see conflict, you still witness injustice, you still feel emotion, but something fundamental is no longer hooked. You are no longer standing against reality, you are standing within it. And from that position, clarity replaces reaction. Living without separation does not mean withdrawing from society or pretending division doesn't exist. It means recognizing that division is a surface phenomenon, not the foundation of being. You no longer define yourself in opposition, against others, against ideas, against life itself. Action arises, but it is no longer fueled by fear, resentment, or the need to defend an identity. It is precise, appropriate, unburdened. Empathy stops being an effort. When you no longer experience yourself as sealed off, another person's suffering does not feel foreign. Not because you are morally superior, but because the boundary that made their pain other has thinned. Compassion becomes reflexive, not sentimental, not performative, just obvious. You don't help because you should. You help because separation no longer makes sense. This is why systems built on manipulation lose their grip on awakened individuals. Fear-based control relies on fragmentation, on convincing you that you must protect yourself at all costs. But when you no longer experience yourself as fundamentally threatened, those levers fail. You can still participate in the world, but you are no longer internally enslaved by it. Relationships change here, dramatically. You stop using others to complete you, validate you, or stabilize your identity. Love becomes less dramatic, but more real, less transactional, less desperate. You listen more, you project less. You don't need others to be different for you to feel whole. And paradoxically, This creates the space where genuine connection can finally emerge. You may notice fewer words feel necessary, less explanation, less self-justification. Silence becomes comfortable, presence becomes sufficient. People may misinterpret this as detachment or aloofness, but it is the opposite. You are no longer filtered through self-concern. You are more available, not less. This way of being is quietly revolutionary, not because it seeks to overthrow the world, but because it stops feeding the structures that depend on fragmentation. You no longer outsource authority over your worth, your meaning, or your belonging. And when enough people stop doing that, systems built on artificial separation weaken naturally. Do not romanticize this stage. It is not glamorous. It is grounded, ordinary, sometimes lonely, not because you're separate, but because many still speak the language of division. Let that be okay. You are not here to convince anyone. You are here to embody what you have seen. And here is the integration point most people miss. Unity does not remove you from the world. It removes the false distance between you and it. You are not above life. You are not beyond it. You are it, moving, speaking, acting, responding, without the burden of pretending otherwise. There is a moment, quiet, internal, unannounced, when you must decide whether this truth will remain an idea or become your orientation. No one else can make that decision for you. No teacher, no book, no video, not even this one. You can nod in agreement and continue living as a separate self, or you can let the recognition actually change you. The illusion of separation does not end because it is disproven. It ends because it is seen. And once seen clearly, it cannot be unseen. You may forget. You may get distracted. You may fall back into old patterns. But something fundamental has shifted. The lie no longer feels convincing, and the suffering it generates becomes harder to justify. This world does not need more beliefs. It does not need better ideologies or more refined identities. It needs fewer people mistaking their conditioning for their essence. Every cycle of conflict, domination, and despair is rooted in the same error. The belief that we are separate selves competing for survival in a hostile universe. Until that belief dissolves, the patterns will repeat, no matter how advanced the technology or how enlightened the language. And here is the truth most people resist until the end. You don't wake up later. Later is the ego's favorite hiding place. Awakening is not a future event, it is a present recognition. Right now, awareness is already whole. Right now, experience is already happening without division. Right now, the separate self is being propped up by habit alone. Ask yourself, without drama, without judgment, how long you are willing to postpone what is already true. How many more cycles of seeking, fixing, proving, and defending you are willing to endure before questioning the one assumption that underlies them all? The belief that you are alone inside yourself. This is not a call to abandon your life. It is a call to stop misinterpreting it, to stop living as if you are a fragment in a broken world, instead of an expression within a unified field, to stop asking how to become whole, and start noticing that wholeness has never been absent. The ancient Gnostics did not promise salvation in another world. They warned of repetition in this one. They said ignorance binds consciousness to cycles, not as punishment, but as consequence. To forget is to repeat. To remember is to be free. Not free from life, but free within it. So listen carefully and take this seriously. Nothing is stopping you except the habit of believing the voice that says you are separate. You do not need to destroy it. You do not need to fight it. You only need to stop obeying it. Let it speak. Let it fade. Let awareness reclaim itself. Remember now, or repeat forever.